with R's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the GL Racing GTR Build Step 4 or page 8 in the manual. So let's get started. So step 4 is installation of the steering servo and the front suspension onto the chassis. So we're going to need our front suspension that we built, our chassis, servo horn. We're also going to need part A6-1 along with D17 out of this bag, the M2x4 PB screws, the M1.6x4 TM screw, M2x4 KB screw, M2x4 KM screw, and in the manual it says we need a M2x6 KM screw, but my kit did not have a M2x6. I do have a M2x5, so that may have been an update on their second or third batch. So just take note of that. So what we can do first, I think what I'd like to do is install the steering servo horn, and then attach it to the steering link, and then install the suspension. So let's get this opened up. So I decided to go with the Houston RC brand servo, HRC06. The club is having some great results with this, so I went ahead and did the same thing as most people in our club. It has a short wire compared to a lot of the other servos out there, so it's going to give a nice clean install. So what's nice, it comes with this extra lead, which you can essentially plug this in here and then plug this into a normal size servo. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and get this servo centered using this adapter and my 1/10 scale buggy. So I'll get the servo centered up and then we'll continue. Alright, so my servo is now centered up, and I'm going to go ahead and install the Houston RC servo horn. So the trick here is to install the servo horn and then remove the screw, because I believe the screw might come into contact with some of the moving parts. So just take note of that depending on which servo and servo horn you're using. So I'm going to try to install the servo horn as vertical as possible, and that looks like it's probably the closest that I can get it. So I'm just going to install the servo horn. Once you feel it shoulder up, it's good. And then we're just going to go ahead and remove this screw. And if it's nice and tight, it shouldn't come off. You want to make sure that you can see a little bit of the silver from the servo gear, so it doesn't rub on there. So our servo is now ready. We're going to need this part off part tree A6 right here. It's A6-1. So let's get this off the parts tree. So in order to mount the servo onto the servo mount, which is going to install in this orientation here, this is the top and this is the bottom. So it'll install like so. And in order to install it onto the mount, we're going to need 2 M2x4 PB screws. So let's get those. And we're just going to go through the holes in the servo and into the mount on both sides. Once you feel it shoulder up, it's good. You don't want to crank down on it too hard because you are going into plastic and you don't want to strip out the plastic. So before we install this onto the chassis, let's go ahead and install D17. It's the smallest ball stud in the kit. And we should only have one more left in this bag. So let's go ahead and grab that. All right, we're just going to install the ball stud onto the front of the servo, just like so. So there we go. Now we can install the servo onto the chassis. The servo is going to install in these 3 holes. And we're going to need 3 M2x4 KB screws. So looks like since I used, if you had the GL servo, you'd end up using the M1.6x4 TM screw. But since I used the Houston RC servo, I used their screw for the servo horn. So let's get 3 M2x4 KB screws, and we can install our servo onto the chassis. And once you feel the screws shoulder up, it's good. You don't need to crank down on it too hard because you are going into plastic and you don't want to strip anything out. All right, so the steering servo is now installed. We can go ahead and snap on our steering servo onto the ball on the servo horn. There we go. So now we can install our front suspension onto the chassis. So we're going to need 2 M2x4 KM screws and our M2x6 KM screw. And if you don't have the M2x6 KM screw that's included in the manual, you probably have the M2x5 KM screw. So the screws are going to install in these 3 holes here. The 2 M2x4 KM screws are going to be in this hole and this hole. The M2x5 or M2x6 KM screw will be in this center hole right here. So M2x4 KM and M2x5 or M2x6 KM in the center one. So make sure your ball studs are facing the front of the car. And so all I did was install the front end like so. You'll see it mount up just like so. And you can install your screws now. All right, and now we just want to check to make sure the suspension still moves nice and free, and it does. So that's it for step 4 or page 8 in the manual. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know down in the comments if you had any issues and I'll do my best to help you out. But as of now, this is where the build is. Starting to look like a car, so I'm pretty excited. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video, which is going to be step 5 or page 9 in the manual.